Simon MacMahon is Global Head of ESG Research at Sustainalytics and joins us from Toronto. Simon, what is your latest research on this, and where are you going with it?
Yes, so, the war in Ukraine has been integrated into our research in a number of ways. And within our ESG risk rating, we felt that the conflict was extraordinary enough for us to actually introduce a new methodological augmentation, a set of special indicators that allowed us to systematically increase the risk exposure for companies exposed to the conflict. And here we were focused on two dimensions. First, we wanted to really identify the risks related to companies that had significant assets in Ukraine. Companies with assets in Ukraine have ESG risks that cut across several different ESG themes. On the social side, risks include the physical risks to companies, to their employees. There could be workforce shortages due to the conscription of reservists. The conflict may lead to halts in production. And we're also seeing an increased risk of cyber attacks. And from an environmental perspective, we see elevated risks of environmental hazards associated with, asset damage due to the bombing. And so our focus on the one dimension here is on companies with significant assets on Ukraine, but we also see these risks as being particularly acute for companies operating in heavy industries or infrastructure sectors, because their hard assets are less flexible in avoiding the conflict, and they may actually be targets of the bombing. And so, for example, Metinvest is a Dutch steel company. They have more than 50% of their assets in Ukraine. Steel is a heavy industry that's connected to critical infrastructure. And so we see them as having a significantly heightened risk. Their ESG risk score has moved negatively from 30.3 to 41.5, and from a category perspective, from high risk to severe risk. Secondly, we also want to identify companies. Pardon me?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So secondly, we also wanted to identify companies with exposure to the economic measures, the sanctions, and the risk stemming from the deterioration of the Russian-Belarus economic systems, right? And in addition to the direct effects, the sanctions have caused, as we've seen, the ruble to decline, interest rates to spike. And so these knock-on effects are going to affect not just the sanctioned entities, but really the whole economy. And so here we're focused on sectors that are critical for the conflict, which have or may in the future be subject to sanctions, as well as high export sectors that rely on internal trade. We're also seeing heightened risks for those companies that are state-owned or with direct ties to the state. And so, for example, Gazprom, the Russian oil and gas company, is one of these companies that we're looking at.